methodology. Dr. Wortley will describe his methodology and key findings. Dr. Wortley?
Thank you, Lisa. I have to put these glasses on. When I first started analyzing these issues, I didn't require glasses. I did. I analyzed SIU data involving the Toronto Police Service from two time periods, January 1st, 2000 to June 6, 2006, and January 1st, 2013 to June 30th, 2017. I'll refer to them as time period 1 and time period 2. The data was collected from SIU case files. It had to be coded, meaning that it had to be manually entered from case file materials into a unique or an original data set. There is no existing data set that we could draw upon. The 2000 to 2006 data was previously collected and coded as part of the IPRWASH inquiry. This is the first time, however, it's a new analysis of data exclusive to the TPS. When we released before, it was GTA Police Services. The 2013 to 2017 data was collected and coded by the OHRC as part of this inquiry. So it's original and new data. From 2000 to 2006 and 2000 to 2017, much of the information gathered was from SIU directors' reports, which provide detailed information on each SIU investigation. During both time periods, the SIU did not provide case information on ongoing investigations or cases that were where subject officers were before the courts. In total, I analyzed 187 completed investigations from time period 1 and 244 completed investigations from time period 2. How was race determined? The SIU does not regularly collect race-based data. In the majority of cases from time period 2, race was determined by examining SIU investigator notes and various TPS documents. What are some of the major findings? Are black people more likely to have force used against them by the TPS that results in serious injury or death? Over 10 years ago, during time period 1, the answer was yes. Between 2013 and 2017, the answer is still yes. The more serious the police conduct and lethal the outcome, the greater the overrepresentation of black people in the SIU statistics. In 2016, black people made up approximately 8.8% of Toronto's population. However, from 2013 to 2017, they made up 28.8% of police use of force cases that resulted in serious injury or death, 36% of police shootings that resulted in serious injury or death, 61.5% of police use of force cases that resulted in civilian death, and 70% of police shootings that resulted in civilian death. These are gross overrepresentation. This is a gross overrepresentation in these various outcomes. Another way of looking at it, when we compare rates, SIU rates, a black person was 3.6 times more likely than a white person to be involved in a police use of force case that resulted in civilian injury or death, 4.9 times more likely than a white person to be involved in a police shooting that resulted in injury or death, 11.3 times more likely than a white person to be involved in police use of force case that resulted in death, and 19.5 times more likely than a white person to be involved in a police shooting that resulted in civilian death. These, once again, are serious racial disparities. We also considered certain intersectionalities. For example, the rates of use of force are much higher for black males than black females. Black males were significantly also overrepresented as complainants in sexual assault investigations. They represent only 4.1% of the Toronto population, but were complainants in 25% of all SIU sexual assault investigations. White and black people appear to be overrepresented in SIU use of force cases where the civilian was exhibiting mental health issues at the time of the incident. Black people make up, as I said, 8.8% of the Toronto population, but represented 16.2% of use of force cases in which a mental health issue was noted. White people make up 48.4% of the Toronto population, but 65% of use of force cases in which a mental health issue was noted. I should stress that cases involving white civilians were more likely to cite a mental health issue than cases involving black civilians. In 43.6% of all cases involving white civilians, mental health was noted, compared to only 16.7% of cases involving black civilians. The majority of SIU use of force cases did not involve a weapon. In fact, from 2013 to 2017, most civilians who were involved in police use of force were unarmed at the time of their encounter. Black people, 66.7%, were slightly more likely to be without a weapon of any kind than white people, 63.6%. Incidentally, these figures are all found in the various tables in the report. A higher proportion of black people had a gun, 8.3% of black people versus 3.6% of white people, or a knife, 16.7% of black people versus 14.7% of white people in police use of force cases. However, in police shootings, a higher proportion of white people had a gun, 20%, than black people, 11.1%. Although there were more allegations of black people resisting arrest than white people were more likely to have a criminal record, 54.5% for white people versus 44.4% for black. And white people in these incidents were more likely to have allegedly threatened or physically attacked the police, 61.8% versus 44%. What about the outcomes of these investigations? During both time periods, very few SIU investigations resulted in criminal charges against the officers. TPS officers were cleared of criminal wrongdoing in over 90% of all SIU investigations during both time periods. Outcomes did not vary by race. Officers were just as likely to be cleared of criminal wrongdoing in cases involving white civilians as cases involving black civilians. Problems with TPS officer cooperation with the investigations were noted in about 9% of all SIU reports. Examples of lack of cooperation include failure to notify the SIU, delayed notification, or witness officers refusing to answer questions from SIU investigators. Problems with cooperation, once again, were about as likely when investigating a case involving a black civilian as a white civilian. In conclusion, I should stress that there's a great deal of analysis yet to be done on this data. Clearly, we've established that these gross disparities and disproportionalities exist. The next step in the analysis is going to try to explore the various explanations for these racial disparities. I should stress, however, that the size of these racial disparities in and of themselves justify serious research and policy attention. I don't think we can ignore these differences and sweep them under the table. In terms of future analysis, we plan to explore further patterns in use of force. We plan to, for instance, examine the difference between use of force incidents that stem from proactive police actions, like stop and search, or encounters on the street, as opposed to those in which the police are reacting to a call for service. We also want to do further analysis on age and gender differences, want to do further analysis with respect to mental health, socioeconomic status, and the geographic location of where these incidents took place. SIU cases, furthermore, only account for a very small percentage of total use of force cases. We plan to do an additional analysis of use of force incidents examining lower level use of force. And I'm open for questions afterwards. Thank you.
As the Chief Commissioner said earlier, it's important that the OHRC makes sure that the community has a strong voice in our work to eliminate racial profiling and racial discrimination. So we have invited 2 community leaders to share their thoughts on our interim findings and the effect on community. To begin, I would like to introduce Sam Teckle, who works with Success Beyond Limits. Mr. Teckle?